Hello and welcome to the MyHeritage webinar series. I'm Jeff Rasmussen, your host, broadcasting to you live from Middleton, Idaho. Today we have one of my personal favorite presenters and good friend, Ran Sneer, is live with us from MyHeritage headquarters in Tel Aviv, Israel, for his class, New Tools for DNA Matches Research. Thanks to Ran and thanks to the more than 1,900 of you for registering for today's live webinar. Wherever and whenever you are, glad to have you with us. If you haven't noticed the new improvements to the online family tree at MyHeritage, go and take a look. You'll enjoy clean, new design, making it easier than ever to navigate your family tree and make new discoveries. But maybe wait until after our live webinar together concludes. And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Ran Sneer. Ran is Director of Product Management and is responsible for MyHeritage DNA products. He leads a talented team of developers, QA engineers, and designers to create and optimize DNA users' entire journey, from ordering a DNA kit, tracking the kit's progress, receiving results, to leveraging a continually growing suite of features to make the most of the DNA results in genealogical research. He led the development of the chromosome browser for shared DNA segments from concept through production and launch. Please put together your virtual hands and let's give Ran Sneer a nice warm webinar welcome. Hi, Ran, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you so much for having me again.
Oh, it's so good to have you, and always good to have to learn more about DNA. And it's always fun to have you here because we kind of get a glimpse of what's now and what's to come. So, Ran, it looks really good, and the time's all yours.
Thank you so much, Jeff, and hello, everyone. I'll start with apologies. I'm kind of losing my voice. Started a bit earlier today, so I'll do my best to keep up for this hour. So if my voice is not stable throughout this entire hour, my apologies, and I will repeat. I might repeat a few sentences again and again. So as Jeff said, my name is Ran Sneer, and I'm a Director of Product Management at MyHeritage. I've been with MyHeritage for the past 4.5 years or so. I've been managing the DNA product here, given many webinars on this great platform, and it's always a pleasure to come back and talk a little bit more about the different tools that we have, new things that we're adding, that we recently added, things that we're working on and will be adding soon. As I usually do, in this presentation, I'll go over, we have a big crowd today, and I'm not sure whether everyone here is familiar with the different tools that we have for DNA matches on MyHeritage. So I'll give kind of an overview of the product. In between the slides, I'll mention things that were released recently and new tools that we've put out for you guys to use. And towards the end of the presentation, I'll give you a sneak peek for the first time. I haven't shared this yet anywhere else, on something new that we're working on, which we plan to release in the next month or so, which we're very excited about. So stay tuned. It's going to be fun. So as I mentioned, we'll start with a product overview and talk a little bit about the different things that you're going to get if you've tested with MyHeritage DNA, or if you've tested with another vendor and uploaded your raw DNA data file to MyHeritage, which is also optional on MyHeritage. And I'll start with the overview page. So this is kind of like the hub, as we call it internally, where we summarize your results and show you different things. A summary glimpse of your ethnicity estimates and your DNA matches, but today we're going to focus mostly about DNA matches. So we're constantly trying to think of different ways on how you can work with your DNA matches and how to simplify the long list of DNA matches that you're going to get on MyHeritage if you test with us. And the first component that you'll see here on the page are your DNA matches broken by their relationship proximity to you. Most of the presentation I will be showing my own personal results, but in this case you can see, for example, me right there in the middle, and that I have 9 close family, which are from parents to first cousins. These are 9 different people who tested with MyHeritage, and then additional 400 DNA matches in the extended family group, which goes all the way to third cousins. And then fourth cousins and above, I have more than that. This is an old screen capture, to be honest. And since then, the numbers went way up. Every day we're getting new people join us taking the test. So more matches are added daily. But that's kind of like a cool way to start by, going over your close family first, trying to figure out who are these people. Some of them you'll probably know, some might be new, and try to figure out the connection. MyHeritage is we have a very good outreach globally, and people from all around the world are buying our DNA kits. So another view we added is the option to see where your DNA matches live around the world. So you can see, for example, that out of all my DNA matches, roughly 4,800 are living in the States, and then I have about 173 DNA matches from Israel, where I currently live. And that's also a very nice option to see and check whether people from different areas live and where do I get my DNA matches. And if, for example, I want to trace my roots back to France, if I know that I have roots in France, maybe the 94 DNA matches I have who currently live in France is a good starting point for that. So I can click on each one of these countries and I'll be taken to the DNA matches page where the list there will be filtered to show me only the 94 people from France if I clicked on it, for example. Last but not least on this page, we're showing you your DNA matches by their ethnicity results. So you will get ethnicity results on MyHeritage, of course. And these are my own personal results, which some can argue are a bit boring. But when I received my results, for example, I was kind of surprised by the 3.9% Iberian that they have. And if I want to try and understand which side of my family did I inherit the Iberian ethnicity from, I can click on this line right here, and I'll see the 383 DNA matches who share DNA with me, who also have a significant amount of Iberian ethnicity in their own results. And perhaps that will be the angle or the direction of research I'll pursue to understand where my Iberian is coming from. So that was kind of like the overview, the hub. It's a good place to start when you're logging into MyHeritage and looking at your DNA results. The page will update regularly as more DNA matches will be listed. But let's talk about the DNA matches, where the page where most of the work happens. And this is my page. You can see by default it's listed by the people who are more close to you. So you can see my immediate family here, my father, my mom, brother, grandma, etc. And let's take a DNA match for a card. Look at what we have here and what we can use. So I received a new DNA match with a guy, Homer Simpson. He's in his 40s. He's been in his 40s for the past 30 or so years. He's living in the States. And right here from the DNA match card, I have the option to contact Homer. Since Homer is a member on MyHeritage and has taken a DNA test with us, I have the option to contact him and ask questions, share information from my family tree, and try to figure out how me and Homer are related. Just to make it clear, Homer is not on my DNA matches list. This is obviously an example. Next, you will see the estimated relationship, which reads, in this case, first cousin twice removed to a third cousin. Now, some users are feeling more comfortable with these terms and perfectly understand what twice removed means, or what goes in that range between first cousin twice removed to a third cousin. But if this comes a bit complex or not sure, there's the question mark right there at the end of the estimated relationships, which you can click, and that will open a dynamic map or a view which will show you, compared to you, where this DNA match can fit in your family tree. So we can see the different options highlighted in purple, which fits the amount of shared DNA and the number of segments that you have with your DNA match. Those are a result, even though I didn't mark it here, those are a result right here on the right. You can see the genetic data, which translated into Homer being your first cousin twice removed, the third cousin. In this case, I have 1.4% of shared DNA over 10 segments, and the longest one, the largest one, is about 20 centimorgans. We'll get to that a bit later in the presentation. At the bottom of the card, we'll show you important or useful genealogical information, which we were able to pull from Homer's tree on MyHeritage and compare it already to the one that you have, in case you have one on MyHeritage. So you can see here that Homer appears in a family tree on MyHeritage with roughly 900 people, and it's managed by Marge Simpson. There's also an option to contact her if you'll hover over her name. And then below that, in case there's a tree, we'll give you some useful information, such as ancestral surnames, which appear both in your family tree and in Homer's, whether you have smart matches. Smart matches on MyHeritage are indications that we find between your family tree and your DNA Matches family tree. We're scanning your tree and the other person's tree, and we're trying to see if we find people who we think are identical. So that's the same person resides in both trees, which is a good hint and a very good start to understand how you and Homer might be related. So I can see that there are 237 people in my tree for which we found smart matches on Homer's tree. We have ancestral places where Homer's ancestors lived, where they have birth and death events in his family tree. So we list them here too. And that's kind of like a glimpse. There's a little more that we show, and we'll go over that soon. On MyHeritage, you have an option to add a note, which you can see right here. So you can put a note here. It's private. No one other than you will be able to see that. And as you continue with your research, you'll be able to add more information and leave yourself notes when you're making discoveries, such as a potential common ancestor, a surname, things that you saw in his tree that you want to list for yourself so that you can go back later and review. That's the perfect place to put them in. At the top of the DNA Matches, we're giving you the option to filter your list. So the overview page that we looked at just a couple of minutes ago is kind of like quick links to take you to a filtered DNA match list based on different criteria, such as the relationship and the country where those DNA matches live. But you can also access them from here. So you have the tree details, which will give you the option to filter Homer by different genealogical facts, such as whether you want to see only DNA matches with theory of family relativity, which we'll talk about in a second, whether only DNA matches with whom you have smart matches, those with whom you have a shared surname, a shared ancestral place, etc. So that's first section is for genealogical information. Second one is the same as we saw in the circle before. You can filter your list by close, extended, and distant relatives. So that's kind of like an easy start to know who to start by looking at the people who are more close to you based on the genetic information, the amount of shared DNA that you have. Locations, where those DNA matches live today, and their ethnicity results. This December, we released a new feature as part of the ethnicity estimate, which we call genetic groups, which gives you a higher resolution level. Aside of the percentage-based ethnicities that we provide you results for, we're also looking into more than 2,100 places, specific geographic places or ethnic groups around the world, and we're trying to tell you whether we found indications that you belong to these genetic groups. There's also an option to filter your DNA matches by these genetic groups. I'm missing it here in the screen capture, but it was added earlier this year. You have different options to sort your DNA matches list. So by default, they're sorted by the amount of shared DNA. So the closer they are, they will appear first. By the amount of shared segment, the length of the largest segment, by their name, or by most recent. As I mentioned, all the time we're getting new DNA matches, and looking by the recent ones is an option. So you already looked at the ones that you had before. You want to see who was added recently. That's the sorting option for you. There's an option to search your DNA matches list, and you can do that by two factors, either by the name of the DNA match, so I can type here Homer Simpson and find him, or if I'm looking, currently I want to look for my DNA matches who are coming from my Bloom line of the family. From the Bloom branch, I can type here Bloom, and all of the DNA matches who have Bloom in their surname will come back. You can use that even if you have a tree or you don't have a tree. That's fine. Results will still come back. All right, so let's assume that I found the DNA match and I'm interested to learn more than what the DNA match card showed me. And that's the time we'll go to the Review DNA Match page, where we'll see much more information that will help us determine how this DNA match is related to us. So the Review DNA Match page is a long page showing you different components. We'll go over each one of them. So the first one is the theory of family relativity, which is a feature that we released about 2 years ago, I think. And we're updating the results frequently. Every couple of months, we're rerunning the algorithm. And theory of family relativity is something a bit different than the rest of the tools that we have here on this page. And what it basically does, it's kind of looking for, in every possible way inside MyHeritage, for an explanation how you could be related to a DNA match. To date, on MyHeritage, we have 14 billion historical records, and we have more than 80 million family trees. And in those family trees, we have about 4.7 billion profiles, different individuals. And as I explained, we have smart matches connecting people from one tree to another, and record matches, which also give us more information and connect to more family members and ancestors that link from our trees. And the way to look at it is that what we try to do with a theory of family relativity, internally we called it the big tree, is where we took all of those data points that we have on MyHeritage and we tried connecting the dots and building one huge family tree consisting of all the information we have on MyHeritage, which I just mentioned, and try to build one huge graph where I can start from one person and hopefully end up with every other person on MyHeritage when it's possible. And that's what theory of family relativity does. And let's look at an example. So currently I'm logged in as Roman, and I have a DNA match called Emilia. And for Emilia, we were able to tell, for example, that she's first cousin to third cousin, and not much more than that. There are no shared surnames or places. And that's all we were able to do up until we had theory of family relativity. But now with theory, we were able to find a suggestion or a hypothesis how Roman and Emilia are connected, and that's through these common ancestors that you see here on the graph. Let's see how we did that by going to the full theory page, which you can access from the review match page. So this is the full theory page, and we can see here that Emilia is our second cousin once removed on our mother's side. And we found different paths because probably there are many trees and records which we could use to suggest this relationship between the two. And let's see how it works. So we started off with Roman's website. I'm Roman. We're starting off with my tree. And in my tree, I added my mom and my grandfather, and then I stopped, either because I don't know more or because I don't have more information, or I don't have the time. And that's it. I stopped with Kip Solomon, my grandfather. But luckily, we were able to find a smart match, another Kip Solomon, which we believe is the same Kip Solomon. And he exists on a different website, Collision website, managed by a Laura Collision from Australia, unrelated to this DNA match at all. A member on MyHeritage who created a family tree. But we were able to make that link and jump to her family tree. We will show you an indication, both for smart and record matches, of what is the score that we decided to give for them. So in this case, we decided to give 100%, but in many of the cases, you'd like to question that and look for yourself. So we made that clickable, and if you'll click on that, this screen will open up, showing you the information we have on Kip Solomon in tree number 1, and then the information that we have on him in the second tree. And you can see that some of the information was either logged a bit differently, such as the death place, which is New York or NY. I knew that Kip died circa 1894. On the other side, they decided to give a more exact date. I listed his wife and children. So I can look at the smart match and decide for myself whether it makes sense or not, whether I do believe it's the same person. And that will help me make the judgment whether this theory is correct or not. I can contact Laura, who built this family tree, who is the manager of this family tree, and ask further questions if I want. But then we're continuing with Laura up until we get to Alexander and Margaret, all the way up there at the top. Here, we're starting to go down because our theory determined that these are the common ancestors for the two of us. So we're going down, and then we're making another jump. We got up until John Collision Jr., which we believe that we found on another family tree on MyHeritage managed by Jacqueline from Great Britain. So we're making another jump to a different tree, keep going down up until eventually we're ending up in the Smith website, which is managed by Amelia, our DNA match, and we can see the hops and how we go from one individual to another, and that is the theory that we came up with. And it's up to us to decide whether this theory is correct or not. The reason we decided to call this theory of family relativity is because we're uncertain whether that information is correct or not. Many of these theories are based on information people put in their family trees, which, as some of you know, sometimes is correct and sometimes is incorrect due to errors or wrong citations or guesses. So we're not sure, but we're giving that as a suggestion to you, which can help you solve the mystery of how you're connected to your DNA matches. And not long ago, about a month ago, we added a feature that many of you have asked, many of our users have asked, and that's the option to confirm or reject a theory, to make it easier for you to keep track of your DNA matches and theories. So right now, in the theory of family relativity screen, at the top you'll have, is this theory correct? And you can choose whether to confirm or reject it. If you're unsure, you can leave it as is and go back to it later, no problem. And also, if you make a decision, you can always undo that. So in this case right here, this option, I need to say, exists both in the review match page where you saw the consolidated view, where you see just the path between you and her, and also in the full theory page. So that also exists here, and you can confirm and reject from both. So if I decided to confirm this theory, that's great. I'll get an indication that the theory was confirmed with an option to undo. And we recommend that you add new information to your tree based on this theory. As I mentioned before, maybe you saw that, there are different paths on how a theory can be determined. Some goes through certain trees, some go through records, but we sometimes have more than one option how two people are connected. We were able to use different sources to figure that out. And you have the option, so in some of the cases, those people will be listed with different names, more information, less information. So that's a good opportunity for you, and we gave you a hyperlink to go to your family tree, your own, if you want to add this DNA match to your tree and the new information that you discovered. So you can look at your theory and the paths for reference and decide which information you want to put in. Back to the DNA match card. So up till now, we had only an indication that Sam Brooks is your third cousin, according to the theory of family relativity. That's a DNA match of mine. But now, after I've confirmed it, I get this indication right here that I already looked at this DNA match and it's confirmed. Same will happen if I rejected it. So if you'll filter your list of DNA matches to show only the ones with whom you have a theory of family relativity, it makes it much more easier now to see which ones you already reviewed, confirmed, or rejected, and which ones are still pending for you to look at. That's very useful in cases where you have lots of lots of theories, and also when we're updating the algorithm and running it again to look for more theories, as people are adding more and more family trees, and we're adding more records to MyHeritage, we're able to find more records. So more theories will come up, and that will also help you understand which ones you already looked at and which ones you haven't yet. So that's a recent addition from about a month ago, I believe. Next in the list, we have the smart matches. So these, I explained, are people that exist in your family tree and in the other person's family tree. Here I'm looking at my cousin Tomer, and I can see that both me and Tomer have Professor Rosenfeld, both on my side and his side, and that's great. That can help me look at the family tree, understand who are the people that he has, what are those people relationships to Tomer, and help me figure out how he's related to me. Ancestral surnames are extremely important and very useful. So if I'm looking at my list of DNA matches and at my DNA match, and he has surnames, and we also share those surnames, I also have those in the tree, that's also a very good hint as to how we could be related. So if in Tomer's case, I can see that he has Bloom, I know that Bloom is on my maternal side, and that's very useful to start looking at. Even if you don't have shared surnames, like we're showing in this example right here, we would still list you the surnames from your family tree and the other person's family tree. We do have technologies on MyHeritage to identify different ways to spell surnames. So if I had Haidt, for example, on my family tree with just H, we probably would have identified that as a shared surname. But in some of the cases, we don't do that, and we also support different language transliteration. So if I have Bloom written in Hebrew and he has Bloom written in English, we will also be able to detect that. But we don't support all of the languages, and there are different ways to write names. So that's also an option. We're listing those for you, that you can manually look at the names and see if everything rings a bell. Ancestral places look at the ancestors from both your family tree and your DNA matches family tree, and are breaking it down to country level and state level in the United States. And we're trying to tell you whether we were able to find ancestral events such as birth and death that both of you have in the same places. So with Tomer, for example, I can see that I have events in Bulgaria, Israel, Romania, Russia, and Turkey. And we are also able to break it down to the city level in some of the cases. So I can mention here that we both have events in Sofia, Bulgaria, which is great. Next on the page, you'll find your shared DNA matches. If my DNA match, who I currently look at, doesn't have a family tree on MyHeritage, unfortunately, we will not be able to use genealogical information to try and understand how we're related, but also solely based on the genetic information that we have, these sometimes are good hints. So let's take Tomer here, for example, and look at the shared DNA matches. Shared DNA matches are people who appear also on my DNA match list, people with whom I share DNA, and also my DNA match has on his DNA matches list. So I'm looking at the list here, and for example, I can see my mom and her sister, but when I'm going over the list, I don't see my dad, who I tested, and any of the cousins from my paternal side who I've tested. So even if Tomer didn't have a tree on MyHeritage, and I didn't know how I'm related to him, that's a very good hint that Tomer is connected to me on my maternal side. And I can use the percentages that we have between me and the DNA and the shared DNA match, and Tomer and the shared DNA match, to overrule some of the options. And if my mom, for example, is Tomer aunt, that can also help figure out how we're related. Those are very close DNA matches, so it's less relevant here, but that also really helps to overrule some of the different options for family connections for your DNA matches. On the right side, you will sometimes see this bubble, this indication, that indicates that the three of you, your DNA match, and that specific shared DNA match have at least one triangulated segment, which is a term we'll explain in a couple more slides. So we'll get to that soon. Below the shared DNA matches, we'll show you a glimpse of the pedigree chart of your DNA match. So instead of going, there are various options on where to go and look at the full tree of your DNA match. But this is kind of like a fast overview which shows you about 6 generations of your DNA match and the people listed on this tree. And you can look at them and see if someone rings a bell or you're familiar with these surnames. Shared ethnicities and genetic groups. As I mentioned before, this is an option that was also possible from the overview page. If the person doesn't have a DNA match, doesn't have a family tree on MyHeritage, I'm sorry, and I know that I'm 50% Italian, for example, and 50% Iberian, and I know that my Italian side is from my maternal side, if I see that Tomer has also Italian in his DNA results, that's a really good opportunity for me to look at that and maybe decide to go with to start with the maternal side and estimate that Tomer is coming from that part of the family, that side of my family. We're also listing here genetic groups. So that's also very useful because the genetic groups, as I said, are in a higher resolution. So sometimes we'll be able to tell you not only Iberian, but he's coming from a specific district in Spain. And I can also see whether Elon, in this case, my DNA match, also has that district in Spain in his results, and that can point me in the right direction. The chromosome browser is the last tool that we have on this page, which takes the amount of shared DNA that you have and the number of segments and show it to you on a chromosome browser. It just reflects where on the 22 autosomal chromosomes, which we use to determine the amount of shared DNA that you have with other people tested on MyHeritage, where we found those identical regions. And there are different webinars I gave in the past. I believe all are available here on the platform, which talk a little bit more about the science and behind the scenes and how to use that. But basically, when we're getting your list of your raw DNA data file and we're trying to match it with the data file of the DNA of the other people who tested, we're trying to look for genetic sequences that repeat in which are long enough so that we'll have the tendency to believe that they're coming from a common ancestor, or have a potential to be inherited by the two of you from a common ancestor. As you can see in the example here, that's an example for example, one chromosome. We have two pairs for each chromosome, one from mom and one from dad. And when we find a sequence that repeats between two people, that's exactly what you see here. We're telling you, marked in purple, where these areas are on the chromosome. Let's talk a little bit about triangulated segments and what you can do with them. So triangulated segments are shared DNA segments that you or a person whose DNA kit you manage and all of the other selected DNA matches, they all share with each other and therefore likely all inherited from a common ancestor. So you can compare more than 3 people, and we'll see that in a second, and try to see whether all of you are descendant of a common ancestor, whether all of you are matching one another, and also matching in the same spot, same position, or genetic markers on the chromosome. Let's look at this example for how a segment is how we inherit segments from our common ancestors. So in this graph right here, in this family tree, we have 4 people who have taken a DNA test. And we want to see who among these people will share DNA with one another, and whether some of them have common ancestors that are in common for 2, 3, or all of them. So I hope you can see that, but in the case of Carol, Alice, and Bob, they all probably share some amount of DNA which was inherited from William and Zandra, all the way up there at the bottom, because they're all descendants of William and Zandra, and probably all of them, we should expect all of them to be DNA matches to one another, excuse me, and have inherited some parts of their DNA. So we should expect them in common. Another group that we can see here are Alice, Bob, and David, who are all descendants of Eve and Zelda. So similar to what we saw with the first group, here we should expect to see also DNA shared between the 3 of them. Unfortunately, if we'll try to compare all 4 of them, we probably won't be able to find a DNA segment which all of them have in common, since Carol and David, at least according to this family tree, do not share a common ancestor. Let's see that with examples using the chromosome browser. So the chromosome browser can be used from the tools section in your DNA results. Click on explore, and you'll get to a new page where you can add up to 7 DNA matches and see whether they all match one another and triangulate. So you can look at your DNA matches. You can search by their name. In this case, we assume that in this case you already probably know who you're going to look at because you saw them on your DNA matches list. And you can add them and compare to see what the results look like. Let's start with my with my dad and his mom, my grandma. And I want to see whether the 3 of us share DNA, which I expect to happen. I should be sharing 50% of DNA with my dad and about 25% of DNA with my mom, with my grandma. and my dad and my grandma should share 50% between them. And when I'm comparing, I can see that I get a line, a colored line, which represents the shared DNA I have with that person. So for my father, you can see that I share a full chromosome. That's one of the pairs, right? Half of the chromosome I share with my dad, one pair, because I inherited it completely from him, and the other one from my mom. And with my grandma, you can see the areas where I share DNA with my grandma, highlighted here in kind of like a yellow-orange hue. And you see those bubbles that we indicate here. This is where the triangulation happens, okay? So if we'll take chromosome number 1 right here, this is a spot where I'm matching my dad, I'm matching my grandma, but also my dad and my grandma are matching here in this spot. So that's a good indication that we have probably, the three of us have a common ancestor, in this case my grandma herself, who have passed on to us that piece of DNA that we have here. And there are 25 such triangulated segments. If you hover over each one of these triangulated segments, you'll get some information on the chromosome, where they are, where do they start and stop, and you can use that for reference later on when you're trying to understand how DNA matches who you don't know how you're related to are connected to you. At the bottom of the chromosome browser, of the graphical part of the chromosome browser, you'll see a table summarizing what you could have seen if you hovered over the triangulated segment. That's just a table summarizing the same information, if that's easier for you to digest using that. Let's look at my grandma and this person right here, Jackie. And even though you see that there's an overlap, right? Let's take chromosome 6 right here. You can see that I'm sharing with my grandma Raya DNA over here. That's the position where I have with her. And with Jackie, I have DNA shared from here to there. So there's an overlap, right? But the chromosome browser tells me that there are no triangulated segments. So why does that happen? Why do I have these areas where it seems like there's a commonality? We both have the same DNA, the same segment here inherited from a common ancestor, but there's no bubble, and I get an indication there are no triangulated segments. And the reason, again, is that we're inheriting parts both from mom and dad. So there are pairs of chromosomes. And probably what happened here is that with my grandma, I'm sharing this part of my DNA, and with Jackie, I'm sharing the second one. And if we're looking at the two of them right here, we can see that there's no sequence that repeats. There's even a good chance that my grandma and Jackie don't match at all. And that is why there's no triangulation, and probably the three of us are not related through a common ancestor. So look for the bubbles. The best example, by the way, for no triangulation when you see an overlap is if you're lucky and had the chance to test both parents. I had that opportunity. So my dad is on the upper line and my mom is on the lower one. And you can see that I'm matching DNA with all of them throughout the chromosome, but I don't have any triangulated segments. And the reason is that they're not related to each other, at least not that I know of. I'm going to show you an example of how I use the chromosome browser when I get a new DNA match, and hopefully they'll be a little bit clearer now. So let's assume I have a new DNA match on my matches list, Jean Carl Feldman, and there's no family tree on my heritage. So unfortunately, I can't use any of the genealogical information. And I'm Ashkenazi, Jewish Ashkenazi from both sides. So his ethnicity estimate didn't help me as well. Neither did the genetic groups, unfortunately. So I'm left with the chromosome browser, which is a good tool to look at DNA matches. And the way I do that is that I start by adding a known relative, someone who I know the connection to and how we're related, and I'm adding the new DNA match in question, the one I'm trying to understand how I'm related to. So I'm starting with my mom and Jean, and I'm comparing. And the chromosome browser tells me that there is no triangulation segment. There are no triangulated segment in this case, meaning either, since I'm sharing 50% of my chromosome with my mom, it probably means that Jean is not matched to my mom in any way. So I'm going back to my family tree, and for now I'm putting aside, I'm assuming that Jean is not related to me through mom. And I'm going to go with dad now. So I'm going to take my father, Rafael, and I'll take Jean, and I'll try to see if now there are triangulations, and that's great. I can see that I have 7 triangulated segments, and I can look exactly where they are. And in such case, I can look at that and assume for now that Jean is related to me through my dad. As I mentioned before, I was lucky and I was able to test my grandma, his mother, my father's mother, and I'm trying to compare now my grandma Raya to Jean. And there are no triangulated segments again. So I'm gonna assume for now that Jean is not related to me through grandma, but rather from my grandpa. And I will try to look first, as I don't have the option to test my grandfather as he passed away a long time ago. I can take other cousins related through this side of the family and test them and try to go up in the generations up until I find the right person or the right couple and hopefully cross that with some genealogical information that I have. Another cool tool I want to talk about today, before we conclude and talk about some new stuff coming soon, are the autoclusters. Another very cool feature, which we added about 2 years ago again, I think. We worked on that with E.J. Blom from Genetic Affairs, and he came up with a nice way how to illustrate a method sometimes known as the leads method, which helps you organize your DNA matches in a very unique way, which quickly lets you see how people are related to one another. So when you'll go to your autoclusters, you can generate them for yourself or for other kits that you manage on MyHeritage. That's a good opportunity to mention that on MyHeritage you can manage DNA kits for yourself and for other family members if you want, and have access to their results. And when you click to generate, you will receive an autocluster report, which looks something like that. When you open it, things will look a bit messy at the beginning, but automatically after half of a second, these DNA matches will automatically reorganize themselves to show you how they're sorted into different groups. And to better understand what we're doing here, we need to show a little bit of examples and talk a little bit about DNA matches and the shared DNA matches component or tool that I spoke about a little bit earlier. What we're actually doing here is going over your DNA matches, and for each one of these DNA matches, we're looking at the shared DNA matches. And we're trying to group them together. We're trying to look whether a DNA match that you have has a lot of shared DNA matches between in their list, and those have shared DNA matches with other DNA matches. And we're trying to group them together into groups of people who share DNA match with one another, and those who don't. So let's take myself, for example, and I took my DNA matches A, B, C, and D, and we saw that match A matches B, who matches C, who matches D, and they're all matching one another. They all have those DNA matches on their DNA matches list. However, I have 3 more DNA matches, E, F, and G, and they don't match the other people from the first group. They're coming from a different branch of the family, probably. I have the group on the left is probably related to me through one side, while the other ones are related to me through another side. And within those groups, each one separately, there is enough amount of shared DNA so that they're all connected within those groups to one another. So for example, that can hint to me pretty fast, maybe, that on the left side, these are matches related to me from my paternal side, and on the right side, these are matches related to me on my maternal side. And this is what the report actually shows you. So each bulk, each cluster, actually groups together DNA matches who are sharing DNA with one another. And let's deep dive and look at what we have here. So for each one of the clusters, we'll tell you how many DNA matches ended up in this cluster after we ran our algorithm. And you can hover and see the names of the people who ended up in this cluster. Let's zoom in and look at one of these clusters. Let's start with the first one. So what you can see here are basically the names of the people these are all your DNA matches, and they appear both on the X axis and on the Y axis, X and Y. And you can see who matched DNA with who. So all of these are your DNA matches. But for example, I can see that Wilson Brook and Greg Hicks are matching each other, are both matching each other as well. And Wilson also matches Kaya and Hida and Crystal. Those are marked with colors right here. So out of the 15 people that I have in this cluster, Wilson is matching about 13 of them. So that's a good enough amount to indicate that he should be clustered together with all of these people. And we're running an algorithm that checks whether all these people match enough people to end in that cluster. So now I have a bulk of people, 15 of my DNA matches, already automatically sorted for me and clustered together so that I can look at them, and perhaps now looking at the data coming from all of these people, ethnicities, surnames, ancestral places, try to figure out how this group is related to me. What is the ancestral line I should pursue that probably all these people are related to me through. Sometimes, as I mentioned, you will not see a colored cell. So in this case, Hilda and Macy are not matching one another. But because they match enough people in this cluster, the algorithm decided still to cluster them together and put them together. And every now and then you will see a gray spot. Gray spot is a situation in which two people, two DNA matches, were probably good, could have fit into both clusters, and we just couldn't decide to which one. So we're indicating that separately. So in this case, Mandy and Rihanna are shared DNA matches. They're both my DNA matches, and they're sharing one another, but we couldn't decide whether to put them in the, they fit both in the orange cluster, which you see here, and in the green cluster, which you can see here. In some of the cases, you'll see that many matches could have probably fit into two different clusters. That could be a hint that if perhaps there was one more DNA match, really good sign that these two clusters could have merged together into one bigger cluster, but still the algorithm decided to split that. And what this cluster actually mean is that all these DNA matches are probably related to me through ancestor A. These are from ancestor B, ancestor C and D, etc. So that's a good hint, and it's really useful to look at those DNA matches as a bulk, as a group of people. If you'll scroll to the bottom of the list, you'll have the option to look at those clusters in a table view, which will list to you their names, the amount of centimorgans that you share. You can sort this list and filter and give different criterias, how many people you have in common within that group, which cluster they belong to, whether they have a tree on MyHeritage, and what is the size of their tree. If you put a note on these DNA matches, we will list it to you here as well. And you can click on any one of these DNA matches and end up in the tree, in this review DNA match page for that DNA match to look at more information. All right. So these are the different tools in a quick 50-minute summary that we have on MyHeritage. But what I also wanted to do today is give you a sneak peek, something that's coming up hopefully in the next month or so, which we've been working on in the past couple of months. It's a new capability, a new tool, long requested by many users that we add on the website. And that will be to add your DNA matches into labels. So today, many users, as I mentioned before, are adding their DNA matches or adding information on their DNA matches using notes. They put notes as they go by, but that's not, it's one way, and usually it's there to put a lot of information. But sometimes you look at a DNA match and you want to label it. You want to put something that will say this belongs to this group of people, or I want to for now allocate this person to other group of people who I already looked at. And this is what we're building now. So we're looking now at the DNA matches page, which you saw before. And if you can see here, now you have a left panel added to each one of these DNA matches. The note that you previously had here on the upper right corner, move to the left. This will be the area where you'll be able to manage your DNA matches and label them and mark them as favorites. And what we wanted to do here is that if you'll click and mark, and you can do that with more than one DNA match, and you'll select a couple of DNA matches, a drawer, what we call a drawer or a panel, will be open to the right, where you can manage your labels and create new ones and associate or label DNA matches into those labels that you created. So if I decided that Chakrika and Gabriel are both related to me through my grandmother, Raya, for example, I create a label called Grandma Raya and label those DNA matches who I think are related through her. So I'll click on Create New Label, which you see here, and I'll be able to give this label a name. In this case, we decided, for the sake of the example, to call it My Close Family in the US. And you can choose a color which will represent that label that you're creating, and save that. And then you can add about 24 different labels to categorize your DNA matches and keep that, and it will come useful both here and in other pages on the website. And you can choose to label those DNA matches as Close Family in the US, for example, and hit Apply, and that indication will be added to those DNA matches, as I hope you can see on the left. So you can see that I took Chakrika and I marked her with the orange label, which is close relative in the US, as I decided to call it. And I also added a note for her. So that will also be available here. And you can go nuts, and you can add, again, as I mentioned, up to 24 different labels, a DNA match to a label. And that's great. And you can do that. But I think what will be most useful for you guys is to actually filter your DNA matches by those labels that you've added and marked. So we're going to add a new filtering option, as you can see here at the bottom, at the top. So here are the three details, the relationship. This filter is currently filtered to show UK matches, ethnicities, genetic groups, and you'll have a new option to filter by labels, which will let you filter to see only your favorite ones or ones who you have already added into labels that you created. That's also a place to create a new label. There'll be an option to edit, to move matches from one label to another. And that's, I think, a very useful tool for many of you to work with your DNA matches and sort your list in a way that gives you more control of them and manually decide where you want to add that. We plan on adding that in these indications, and also the option to label DNA matches from here and from the review DNA match page. And then you can use your filtering and to the chromosome browser later on, and you'll be able to filter your list and keep track of your research to make sure that your DNA matches are labeled in a way that's easier for you to find them, and hint to you when you looked at shared DNA matches, for example, how these other people who you have not yet labeled could be related. So that's coming up in about a month or two. We're very excited about it. It's still in the works, lots of works on this, but hopefully we'll be able to send it out your way in a month or 2 months, and we can't wait to start getting your feedback. And you having share, always looking to see how you're using these tools, these and others, what type of labels you create, where in the product it's more comfortable for you to add labels, to mark your DNA matches with labels, and we're looking forward to that. And with that, I will conclude for today. I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll be happy to answer any questions which you may have. And thanks again.
And thank you, Ran. And by the way, the users are just going crazy here in the comments area with their enthusiastic feedback about what you just showed all of us. Can you hurry up these this last month or so we can get using this? Yeah, it looks very exciting. Well done.
I promise you that we want to push this out as fast as possible. We want to make sure that we do it properly. There are no glitches, and it's useful and fun. Yeah. And the moment it's ready, I promise not to hold it,
Okay.
and give all of you the opportunity to play with it.
Yeah, very
Absolutely.
good. Thanks to all of you. I mean, the comments just keep on coming in here. Thank you. And by the way, after the webinar concludes, you are always presented with a quick survey, and I just want you to know that we do in fact read all of those comments and ratings, and so when that does show up for you today, yeah, do look at it and fill it out. We appreciate that. Okay, yeah, Nancy. Nancy says, I love the label option. Thanks. I love MyHeritage. Okay. Thanks, Nancy. Let's switch over here. Let's do a couple of door prizes, and then we'll let Rand's voice rest for just a minute or so here, and then we'll get to your questions. Our next live webinar will be coming up later on this month by Uri Gonen on he'll be talking about the new family tree and relationship diagram that I announced here at the beginning of this live webinar, and yeah, Uri's one. I mean, he is the behind the scenes man, so I'm really excited to have him coming up. So register for that, and we'll see you then. Okay, time for door prizes. So our first door prize will have a 1-year MyHeritage Complete plan, and that gives you access to the family site subscription, and there's all the bullet points there, as well as unlimited access to all of the historical records. And I think I need to update this. I think it's now up to 14 billion historical records. So if you're here, you're eligible to win, and there's nothing that you need to do. We're going to go and say congratulations to, I'm going to write down your name here, Brenda Ormsby. Brenda, thanks for being here, and congratulations. Just watch for an email from me later on today. And then we're going to give away a MyHeritage DNA test kit. So let's go and find one of our viewers. Looks like Darlene Froelich. Congratulations to you, the winner of a MyHeritage DNA kit. Okay, got your names written down here. And let's go ahead and bring Rand back. And Rand, the enthusiastic comments still keep coming in. So we could just spend the rest of the time me just reading all those, but let's go and let's ask Rand some questions. If we have a DNA question, he is the man to ask. Okay, let's go to Catherine. So back, you were talking about when we can confirm a theory of family relativity. Catherine's wondering, are the matches on the other end of the tree, are they notified when we confirm a match?
That's that's a good question. So at the moment, no, we haven't done that.
Okay.
If you're a member on MyHeritage and you get a smart match, sometimes you will be notified that another site has confirmed. We currently haven't done that yet, but we do plan to add it later. We're considering that. Since we launched it just recently, we're trying to see how people are, how they're reacting and how they're using the feature, and we're considering adding it later on.
Well, good. Thank you. Pat says it's clear to get the best use, one needs to put a tree online. Can I put up a private tree, or does it need to be public to anyone to take advantage of what you've shown us here?
So if the tree is private, we obviously won't share any information from that with your DNA matches. They will need to ask for a membership in your tree. I usually, like, the answer I give usually is that everyone can choose for themselves. But obviously, if the idea here is to make it, if we're trying to work on these DNA matches, and there are so many people devoting so much time trying to figure out how their DNA matches are related to them, and you know that better than I do. This genealogical information that we have on our family trees is priceless. It's pure gold, and in huge percentage of the cases, that's the key to understand how people are really related to one another. So personally, I'm encouraging people to make their trees public so that their DNA matches can look into them. They can't make any changes, of course, unless they ask your permissions to do that. But those who prefer to keep their trees private, we absolutely respect that, and that's up to them to decide.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Sandy, who asks, is there a way to print out a filtered match list?
Not really. If you mean by print as in like actual physical printer, you can filter your list and then you can print from your browser the top 10 for that filter. But I want another option, something that exists on MyHeritage. I didn't discuss it today, but there's an option to export your list of DNA matches that will generate an Excel file, a very detailed one showing you lots of information in it. And using the Excel file that you receive, you can then filter your matches by surname or by country, the amount of centimorgans. So I would recommend that if I understood correctly what's the intention.
Okay, and I anticipate Greg being very excited as he just asked if we could export to an Excel file. So thanks for that answer also. Let's go to Steve, who says, I uploaded my family tree to MyHeritage. How long does it take to have it produce those smart matches and the theory of family relativity on the tree?
So I'll just say two things that are important here. So when you upload, you probably exported a JEDCOM file and imported it to MyHeritage, which is great and saves a lot of work, and we do support that. Please make sure that your member on MyHeritage, yourself, is associated with an individual in that tree. Otherwise, we won't be able to make that connection. So some people are importing trees and they are not in those trees. They're managing it for a spouse or something like that. So you need to make sure that when you access the tree, you see yourself and the member is associated with the family tree. There are some explanation both in the Knowledge Center on MyHeritage and in the Help Center on how to do that. So you can look it up. Smart matches are initiated pretty much instantly or within a couple of days. The theory of family relativity, because of the size and the amount of the data that we use, this is not something that happens automatically. Every time we take all of those data points and we kind of give it to the algorithm to digest. So we're doing it periodically, a few times a year. We plan to do it again at the end of somewhere mid-September or end of September. So you should expect new theories to pop up. Again, if you're associated correctly with an individual in your family tree, you should see new theories coming up around October, I hope.
Are users notified when that is updated? This is a question from Betty.
Yes, that's a good question. So 3 different ways to know that it happened. One is that if you go to your DNA matches list and filter your DNA matches, you will see new indications for theories that were generated in the last 30 days. So these will be new theories. Second one, I'm sorry, is that we're usually posting about it on our blog post and in our newsletters that we send out to all users. We'll mention that we had an update to the theory of family relativity. But probably the easiest way is that every week we're going to email you. We're already doing that. For those who have theory of family relativity, every week we're going to send you an email with your closest theory that you haven't looked at yet. So you'll be able to, you'll receive an email telling you, hey, we found a theory between yourself and DNA match with a click, with a button to go and look for that. So maybe in October time frame, an email will land in your inbox telling you that the theory was found.
Okay. Those are fun emails to get. I enjoy those. Let's go to Krister, who's again asking about the theory of family relativity. If you confirm a theory, is there a way to automatically add the missing individuals that might not be in his tree that was found by the theory?
So that's something that we considered when we developed the confirm reject, and we decided, at least for the first phase, not to do that, because when we were looking at the theories, in some of the cases we found, so add to tree probably means that you have ended up to a certain place, right? So for example, I was able to get to my grandmother, and from there I had to use information imported from other family trees on MyHeritage.
Yeah.
In some of the cases, the names will be spelled in different ways. Some of the cases you'll have different paths showing more accurate data or less accurate data. So we decided not to do that for now.
Okay.
Just so that you'll have the option to manually look at the theories and decide what information you want to import and what information you don't want. Otherwise, we'll need to import the entire path and branch till that DNA match so that it can be added to your tree with one click. And for now, we've decided not to do that.
Okay. Thank you. We've got a few people asking about their tree that they maintain via a different tool, and so their data is out of date in their tree on MyHeritage. What's the best way to get that updated? If they were to import an updated GEDCOM file, does that replace what they have, and does that do anything badly with the DNA matches?
So that's a bit tricky. So if you've imported a tree in the past, and it really depends where you're managing your tree to date. But I would either recommend to import and have 2 trees on 2. You can create another family site on MyHeritage and import the new tree. The only thing that can happen, because we're relying on the information from your family tree, is that if you'll delete a family tree that you previously had, theories that exist today, they will not disappear. You will still see them, but we won't be able to show you individual information for them, because we know how we created the paths, we know which trees we went through, and if a tree was deleted, we'll keep it there, but unfortunately we'll have to tell you a deleted individual or something like that on these people, because it doesn't exist anymore in MyHeritage.
Okay.
So either merging them very carefully and deciding which information you want to add. Most important, obviously, are the blood relatives in those family trees for DNA purposes. And otherwise, it's just to create another family site, and with the family, import a new family tree, associate yourself, with your individual in that tree, and that should work.
Yeah, good. A couple have asked about the quote deleted profile phrase that they see sometimes in the theory of family relativity. And Betty says, I'm not sure if I should confirm that theory if she can't see those names. Any thoughts on the deleted profile and what they should do?
Yeah. So the deleted profiles, unfortunately, is what I explained in my previous answer.
Yeah.
We generate the theories at a given time. Let's say that we're going to generate them at the end of September. When we generate them, all these family trees exist. We have all the information. It's public at that point of time, and we can create those theories and show them to you, and you won't see any deleted individuals. But by the time the theory is created till today, for example, maybe someone went and deleted his tree, and in order to respect their privacy and their decisions, we have to show you deleted individual, and we won't be able to show that information anymore. As to how to handle those theories, I recommend 2 options. One, I think they're still useful. They give you, it depends really on what was deleted, but in some cases, you'll see the rest of the trees, and that can be useful to figure out what's going on. Or wait for the next update when we'll rerun the algorithm, and hopefully a new tree was created, which we can use to regenerate those theories. We won't be showing you theories with deleted individuals anymore, because we won't be able to find them as the information was deleted in the meantime between those runs.
Good. Yeah, makes sense. Thank you. Let's see. When you're looking at, this is a question from Carolyn, when you are looking at that tree in the theory of family relativity, are you able to see the sources or other additional information about the people that's in this theory of family relativity?
Absolutely. I believe about a year ago I gave a very, very detailed, with tons of examples on theory of family relativity. here on Family Tree Webinars. So you can look it up. I believe it's still there. And yes, both if we're using records or we're using individuals from family trees, on each one of them you can click and hover and get more information. Oh, you found it.
And here we go. Yeah. And now I'm going to do a search for theory. So he's got two of them up here. Here's one entitled Using the Theory of Family Relativity to Research Your Matches. And then I think this is your original one, Suggested Relationship Paths, an inside look at the theory of family relativity. So I'm going to copy that URL and put that in everyone's chat area right now. So there you go.
Perfect, thank you. So here I showed different examples, and on each one of these, due to time constraints, unfortunately I had to go over each feature relatively fast. But there are different webinars here on the platform in which I go over each one of them in more detail. And you can go over each one of these individual or sources, whether these are collections or family trees, and look at that. And all the information that we were able to, that we have on that person in that family tree will be available for you. And there's also an option to hop and look at that individual in that family tree. So that should give you all the information you're probably looking for.
Well, and so will this URL right here. So everybody come, if you want to learn more about what Ran has taught, including his last webinar on introducing genetic groups. That was wonderful. This is where you'll find all of those. Ran, there's a follow-up question about the Excel spreadsheet when we were talking about that. Is that to be able to take advantage of exporting those matches, does that require a certain level of a membership?
Yes. So I went over all of the features that we have on MyHeritage, and some of them are available for free. Some will require a subscription. For those who upload a DNA data file, some of them can be unlocked for a one-time fee. So I just suggest for those of you who have either uploaded or taken a DNA test with us to just go on the website, and for each one of these tools you will either see that it's locked or free, and you can make a decision of whether you want to go the extra mile.
Very good. Well, Ran, you've outdone yourself here today with especially with your voice. Thank you so much. We need to let Ran go and calm that, recover your voice. But thank you so much.
It's time for tea and honey. Yes, thank you, Jeff.
Yes, yeah. Thanks for all that you've done for we genealogists worldwide. I mean, what you do there at the offices in Israel, Ran, you're making a big difference, and just. Well, from me to you, I thank you, but I think in behalf of everyone else here, they'd say the same thing. So thanks to you, Ran, and to MyHeritage, and also thanks to all of you out there for being here at today's webinar. If you want to watch the replay, I'll have that up shortly after we conclude here, and please do share it with others as well. And let's sign off by saying life is short. Do genealogy first. Bye, everyone. Bye, Ran. Good night.
Bye, Jeff. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
Thanks, you too.